Right, so what I'm going to talk about is, next slide, is the options in a city. A lot of us, end up training in institutes and are from different cities and want to go back to a larger city or plan to take a move to go back to a smaller city. So what I'm going to do is give you different options. Next slide. Next. So a little brief of my background is I am an oculoplastic and oncology trained surgeon, and my practice over time has evolved into me not having to see things that don't fit into my specialty. I am a part of a group practice. I also freelance, and I am attached to a corporate hospital, so that gives me a good idea of how things work. I'm also an honorary consultant at a government medical college, which is a good thing, and I don't have any solo experience. Next slide. Next. So whom is this for? This is for people who are in training, who are in residency, who are planning to do a fellowship, or have just finished a fellowship, or are from a larger town where there is a scope and a need for specialist practice, people who have trained in a specialty. If you have a famous ophthalmic surname, maybe this may not be the right place for you to take advice from me. But as you can see, a good surname is not always needed to be successful. So going back to Dr. Pooja also had this slide in her in her presentation of what do you want in life? What is life? So what is your goal? What is your specialty? Where you come from? A lot of these will decide what type of practice you go into, because if you're from a small tier 3 town and your specialty is medical retina UV and you want to do only that exclusively, it may not fit in. You may not be able to have a viable practice there. So for that you may have to move to a larger town, or if you are the only cornea refractive surgeon in your town, you should immediately start up your own solo practice. So you need to see what fits best. There are other factors, your family, what does your spouse do? And what do you eventually want? See, all of us are doing our best to improve the lives of our patients. But in the end, we all look for money and, materialistic comforts that drive us. And of course, some amount of recognition from peers, from patients, or you want a bit of all. Next. So these are the different options that we have. You stay back in the hospital that you trained, or you join a practice as a chain, you join a practice which is already there, or a chain of hospitals as a practice associate. You build your own solo practice, you can do freelancing, or you have the option of going to a government hospital or a tertiary eye care center, as Dr. Bhavik already spoke. These are different options that we have. So I'll be talking on the first 4 ones. Staying back in a training hospital once you've already finished your fellowship. It's because, you need to figure out whether you want to do this for the short term or for the long term. Everybody likes, a good, on your CV or your visiting card, ex-faculty AIMS, ex-faculty LV Prasad, Shankar Netralaya. If that's what you want, do that. You've done a cornea refractive surgery, you want to stay back, do some more hands-on, learn things like ICL or femto, which you normally didn't do in fellowship. Stay back, learn that, get your skills. You still haven't answered what you want in life and what is your motivation, and you're buying time to figure that out, stay back in your hospital, because it's a familiar environment and you're back in the game and there's a good income coming in. Also, this is a good avenue to satisfy your academic kida, as I call it. A lot of us have this thing, and this can be a great place to do that. But it's not, so it has a lot of good things about it. The other option that we have is to join a practice that is already set up. You go back, you have different chains. You had the erstwhile Vasans, the Agrawals, the CFS, a lot of. How is it to go back to a hospital like that? Next. In this case, the practice is already set. You join as a full-time, which has adequate, and the centers have adequate volumes of cases, with a reasonable amount of freedom. Typically, you don't have to invest anything when you practice, and there is good remuneration. So the advantages of doing that are that, next, you get to see and learn how a successful practice works. So when you're in a hospital that is already doing well, you don't have to learn from others' mistakes. You can figure out what works, what doesn't work. So I call this a super fellowship, because you've done your clinical fellowship, and now this is your admin fellowship, where you figure out how to take things that work and put them in a practice on a later date when you plan. The numbers of patients that you see, the cases are assured. You have a fixed income, you get good work experience, and like I said, you can always add that onto your CV if you want to join an institute later on. Things like phacoprobe chalta hai kya, or does the AC work? You don't have to bother about all of these things. These things are taken care of. The AMCs, the instrumentation, all of these are none of your worry, which would come later on in your own solo practice where you have to do all of that. The disadvantages is that, remember, you're still working for someone. You may be a doctor, a super specialist, but you're also just another employee. There are going to be targets that come from above. There are going to be working hours that may be a little inflexible. And you're one amongst many because patients don't come to you, they come to the hospital. And even if you're in a practice that is already set, there will be a certain amount of ceiling to your earnings. Sky is not the limit in this case. The next is a solo practice. So starting out on your own is the biggest thing that one can take. It's a standalone practice that you want to start. A lot of surgeons don't want to immediately put up an operating room because that's a lot of overheads and investment. Patient directly comes to you for all their eye care needs and you have to be their primary caretaker. You may or may not have other consultants visiting you. So what are the advantages of this? You get to choose how you practice, where you practice, what you practice. You are literally your own boss. So you get to be your own boss. It has significantly high earnings. The reason it is more rewarding is because it's also more challenging, and I'll come to that, why they are challenging, is because it's investment heavy. When you start up your own place, you've got to pull in a lot of finances to get that place going. You need to look for staff who are on the same page as you in terms of in their vision, their motivation, and levels of competence. There will be a long incubation period before you even, forget making a profit, before you break even. And you have to persist with that till you break even. Give it time. You can't restrict your practice to one specialty. If you're a retina surgeon and you get a lady with a 5-year-old son saying, "Theek se dikh nahi raha," and he has refractive error, you can't say, "Mujhe bachchon mein glasses prescribe karna nahi aata, aap bagal wale doctor ke paas jao." That doesn't work when you're in a solo practice. You have to see everybody. So your specialty practice is going to take a beating. If you want to go for AIOS, well, your AIOS-YOSI meeting, you'll have to shut your clinic for 4 days. That's a loss of revenue if you're you're a solo practitioner. You will make mistakes, and unfortunately, they will be your own mistakes that you'll have to learn from. You don't have the opportunity of learning from others' mistakes. In the OT, when you're operating, you have to manage your own complications. There is no other backup. If you have a complication, you may have to even patch, send it off to someone else. Each upgrade, whether it's a knowledge upgrade in terms of attending a conference or machine or technology, is extremely expensive. So what are the things, the challenges are, figuring out where, figuring out who else is next to you, how to get the money to start up, and the equipment. I think equipment is going to be spoken about in detail later on. So what are the things that you need to figure out and answer? So this is a checklist that you need to mentally answer before figuring out, are you ready for solo practice? When is the right time? Do you want to immediately go into private practice, wait for some time, work in a hospital, earn some money as a backup just in case, then go into private practice? Once you go in, you can't go back. It's a permanent or a long-term decision that requires persistence and patience. As a freelancer, I work with far too many solo practitioners to know what works and what doesn't. You also have to be prepared that your specialty practice may take a backseat for some time. And as much as we would want to be our own bosses, solo practice may not be cut out for everybody. So you have to figure out whether you're the right person for it. And then comes to freelancing. So freelancing is something where you offer your services as a specialist to different centers. This typically happens in larger metropolitan cities where a lot of solo practitioners are there. You go to different centers on different days of the week, different parts of the cities, and these can be in addition to your hospital attachments where you're already going for a fixed day or a fixed days of the week. How does it work? They'll call you on a particular day, or they'll call up and say, "Oh, we've got so many patients." It could be 20 patients, it could be 2 patients, or by the way, on the way, when you're reaching that place, they call up and say, "Sir, patient chala gaya." So it could be no patients. You have to take it in your stride. Whatever it is, don't undersell yourself. You're a specialist offering a specialist opinion. So be ready to charge the fees that you should. I'll come to more on that later. Advantage is that when you are affiliated as a freelancer or a specialist at a solo practitioner center, building up the practice is not your headache. They're going to do that and refer the cases to you. Volumes will be good because it depends on how well the center is doing. You can have your own flexibility in figuring out when you want to go. And right from day one, it can be financially rewarding. But it comes with far more disadvantages like I'm showing you. Most importantly is breaking into the scene. Now, everyone who starts solo, the first thing they do is get their list of specialists whom they want to call. So everybody has somebody who's already there. How do you disrupt that? How do you change that? How do you get into the scene? That is the most important thing. Everybody wants flexibility. Someday they'll say, oh, I've got patients on Monday. The next week they might say, oh, the patient wants to come on Tuesday. Can you keep juggling things and places around maintaining a schedule? It's difficult because you might spread yourself too thin. You don't always see what you're trained for. You know, I've seen cornea specialists, you know, trained at the best institutes in freelancing cornea practice. Guess how many corneal ulcers they see in Bombay? I'll give you a hint. Think of the shape of the cornea. None. So you don't always end up seeing what you trained for. You end up seeing things that will be referred to you or what the specialist thinks you should see. That may not always fit with what you're doing. And you know, if you're on a holiday and you get a call saying, we have so many patients, can you come down and see? I said, no, I'm on a holiday, I'm coming back a week later. Well, somebody else is going to come and see those patients. You've replaced someone, you're replaceable. You may have a big volume at a center in one day of the week. The next month, that center may not have that many cases. There is uncertainty. And always, you know, when you're a specialist, you have to carry, you want familiar equipment. You carry your own stuff around. That can take a toll. So how to break in the scene? I have this thing, a friend of mine, Anshul Goel, mentioned. He calls it the ABC of private practice. A is availability. That's the biggest thing that people want. Solo practitioners want availability from their freelancing consultants. Behavior, the way you behave, not with them, with the patients. If someone is being able to satisfy a patient's queries, that's all the doctor wants. And finally, competence. If you can show if you can convince the practitioner that you are more competent as compared to the person who's already coming, in terms of skill set, in terms of, you know, if you're a plastic surgeon, you can tell them, I can do endoscopic DCR, which so-and-so cannot, so let me know if you have a case for endoscopic. Slowly you creep in. So freelancing is good in the short term. There is a lot of flexibility, but remember, there is replaceability. You know, immediately you visit multiple places, you get more visibility. It's not always sustainable on the long term, so you should consider if you're going to be an entirely freelancing consultant. At the end of the day, your work will speak for itself. If you do good work, give good results, they will develop good relationships with patients and the doctors. Government and full-timer corporate hospitals, I'm not going to talk on. In addition to all of this, you can always have an academic position in a teaching hospital where you can refer your own unaffording patients to work out. There are a lot of us here who go out of town, out of country once in 3 months, you know, some other state or a neighboring city once in a week or once in a month, once in 2 months. These gigs actually, you know, give you good income and they're good to keep your hands busy. So if you get an invitation, you know, to go to the neighboring state one day in a month, don't say no. You know, these things work out in the long run. And also keep a small interest in academic activity because these things the hospital attachment can satisfy that. Finally, you finished your fellowship and you still want to know what to do, how to break in the scene. These are different options, but how do you do that? Now what do you do? So once you've just finished and come back, first thing is take a break. Nobody needs you to go back and start earning from day one. Take a break, enjoy, and then come back. How do you do that? Do small things. You know, get your business card printed. What do you write? I'm not working anywhere. What do I write? Just write your name, what you do, your degree, your availability, email and phone number. That's all. Hand that over. If you're, you know, say a squint specialist or a plastic specialist, you have a brochure made with pictures letting people know what you're doing so that you can hand them over to doctors whom you meet. Build an online presence. Have a website. You know, as a parent of a small kid, guess which doctor I first referred when my kid fell sick? Dr. Google. Think of 10 years down the line when patients are going to seek out referrals on the internet and come back. Referrals need not necessarily come from ophthalmologists, they'll come online directly to you. If you have a website, you can increase your visibility and get direct referrals. Build an online presence, not just among patients, but also amongst your peers. So what do you do to increase your visibility? Meet the local ophthalmologist. Once you're back, go meet them. Become a medical representative, sit in the waiting hall next to patients, wait for an hour, go meet them. If you're a retina specialist, go back to your city and meet the retina specialist. Seek out their help. Let them know you're here. So just in case, sometime you might get, if they are out of town, they might call you for a while to just see their patients. All of these can work out. Extremely important. All of us are from institutes where people have already passed out and are practicing earlier. Meet your alumni. They are going to be your biggest support group. You don't realize that, but they will. Once you're done with all of this, go back and meet the local ophthalmologist again, because that is what, is going to work. And don't get dissuaded by the things that they will say. I remember going and meeting ophthalmologists and he'll say, oculoplastic surgeon, क्या तुम लोग सिर्फ DCR करते रहते हो और कुछ नहीं आता है किसी को तो करना है so someone has to do it, we'll do it. I've heard things like oculoplastic surgeon, अच्छा तो squint तो आता ही होगा. I'm like yes. So don't people will tell you that you cannot survive on a specialty practice. If you believe it and you want to do that, you have to do that. Don't get dissuaded by what people are saying. Next slide. How else you can do? Participate in your local meets. When you come back, you have your DOS, your BOAs, your local city ophthalmology meeting, your specialty bodies. Attend those meetings, volunteer to present. Find out the scientific committee chairperson or whoever, say I have a case or I have an abstract, present it. Even if you're not presenting, attend it. And all the guys whom you met and persisted meeting, they will see you present and then they'll make a connect. And then next time they have a case similar to the one you presented, they'll call you. Later on, you can think of going to a higher scale or a higher platform like a national event or an international event. The other thing that they don't teach you in medical college, but they should, is how do you charge a patient when you're a freelancer or when you've just begun your practice and you don't know how to. Especially in, when you're visiting a new hospital, you should be very honest, clear, and transparent about what it is. If you want an X amount of money as your charges, so be it. Do not undersell yourself. Like I said, you spent years in reaching the position that you have. You deserve a certain amount of remuneration. If you get a vibe that the ophthalmologist is not going to do that or is not going to pay you for a particular surgery or underpaying you, rethink your association, because these are long-term bridges that you have to work on. In case you don't know how much you should be charging for an RD surgery or an SOR, I've told you, you should meet the other people, other specialists in your town. Ask them, make an Excel sheet. These are things that you should when you start out practice. Sure, this is the second last slide. So, and when you start, with ethics, you have to be very clear. Refuse surgery when you don't want to operate. People will ask you to do cases that you may not be comfortable with. It's best to say no, because an unsatisfied patient can be a worst nightmare, even if a good patient is is the best advertisement. Ghost surgeon is something each one has to judge about. I'm not here to talk about them. Burnout is a real thing. A lot of people have spoken to me about balance before, so I'm not going to talk more on this. So for me, the biggest thing from this is that my meetings with my alumni in the city of Bombay worked out next, because all my hospital attachments have evolved through my alumni in SN and LV Prasad. My website is now a major source of my referral for patients. So even though I don't have a solo practice now, the goal is to reach that in a couple of years. To summarize, you're not the only stakeholder. There is family, there are friends and mentors, so discuss with everyone what works for you, and don't forget to have fun. Remember, the concept of an unsuccessful ophthalmologist doesn't exist in India because there are 1.3 billion people. There is going to be work for everyone. And at the end of the day, enjoy what you do, because that's the only way you will be continue to doing what you enjoy. The best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. Thank you.